Hello, my name is Anthony Lopez, and I'll be talking about perceptual process and how it applies to me and my mother's relationship in the early fall of 2024. Now, what is perceptual process? I'm going to go over the parts of perceptual process that apply most to the situation. First is selection. So, selection involves determining which parts of an interaction capture our attention. So, during this process, we also tend to use stimuli and schemas that we've accumulated over time and through past experiences. These schemas can be many things. They can be stress. They can be certain situations that we use to pick up mood swings, pick up what the kind of intention we're using in our words, what we think people mean rather than actually knowing. Now, after selection, there's organization. Organization is the process of arranging these stimuli, arranging the schema into patterns that are recognizable. And these are also patterns that we accumulate over time from our past. Usually, they're past experiences, they're expectations we have of people, again, collected from our past, usually through childhood, early development, things that we experience over and over again. So we tend to put them in categories that are recognizable. And then we filter that stimuli. We put them into those categories. That way it's easier for our brains to sort. Now, after organization is interpretation. This is the final stage of perceptual process. Interpretation is when we assign a meaning to the organized information, and interpretation is often influenced by personal history. As mentioned before, these patterns accumulate over time as we interact with certain people, and we learn how to perceive things, and we learn how to process this different information. And it differs with everybody. Especially in my case, with me and my mother, we're very different. Just to give context, my mother is second generation. She moved here after she was born in Mexico, and she grew up here. Spanish was her first language. She had to do a lot of assimilating. So her experiences are very different. When she had me in 2006, I was her first son. She had me at 19. So I was, as to put it very simply, her very first son. So I mean a big, very great deal to her. Now, when I turned 5, her and my father had personal disagreements, so they separated. They had to go to court and have different scheduled times in which either one of them would have custody of me. And as I got older, I just started making personal choices that required a lot of independence. And this was hard for her at times, as well as my dad. Now, of course, because in this case my mother had primary custody, there were times where I wanted to spend more time with my father, which meant I had to ask, which meant I had to go out of my way, ask my mom, ask my dad, and of course, as any parent would, they get nervous. They don't want to think about they don't want to think badly of what their child actually thinks of them, because it's destructive. And so when I would ask my mother to spend more time with my dad, if I could spend more time with my dad, of course she'd get nervous. At the time, I never understood why, because of course, in my point of view, I wanted to spend more time with my dad, and I expected her to understand this. Now, as a child, I can't communicate that directly, but it's expected. Now, in her now when we're applying this to perceptual process, I'm going to fast forward to me graduating high school and transitioning into community college, PCC to be specific. See, I lived with my mother primarily, and going to PCC, I didn't have as much freedom as I would have if I lived with my father. So, living with my dad, I had more space to study, and I had my own personal space at my mother's house. Well, more so my grandmother's house. We all shared. She let us live there. I shared a room with two of my cousins, so there wasn't as much personal freedom as I would have preferred. However, I'd never expressed that fully to my mother, so there was a lot of push and pull and a lot of expectations that weren't met when it came to communication. So when the time came, and I came to the conclusion myself that I wanted to move with my dad to make it easier to go to PCC, Furthermore, also my dad had a car that he hardly used, so I would be able to use that car to commute to Pasadena, whereas with my mom, I would have to share a car with her, and she was already taking my younger sisters to school, to daycare, to dance practice. I didn't want to inconvenience her, but again, I came upon this conclusion myself. I figured, well, if I live with my dad, things will be easier. I won't have to inconvenience my mother. I won't have to inconvenience my sisters. School will be easier. Things will be easier for all of us. That's what I thought. And of course, I figured this isn't a big deal. As long as I tell her, nothing strange will happen, right? At this point, I'm already 18. So I approach my mother and I say, "Hey, mom, I don't know if I mentioned this to you already," which, by the way, I hadn't mentioned it to her. Actually, I was mentioning it to her about a week before I decided to move in with my dad. I said, "Hey, mom, I've been thinking I want to start living with my dad. I figure it'll be easier for the both of us." And immediately, I was met with disdain. I was met with discomfort. If I remember exactly, the words we exchanged were very hurtful. As in, she felt very hurt. She felt hurt that instead of telling her beforehand, chose to tell her now. And when we're looking at perceptual process, rather than looking at my need to convenience the both of us, she selected my decision to live with my father rather than her as the most significant detail, which is the process of selection. When it comes to organization, choosing my father over her, deciding to spend more time with her, it hurt her personally. Whereas I selected her disapproval as the most important cue rather than her concern. And that in itself was the flaw, was the flaw in our communication and perceptual process. So what could we have done better? I should have seen her concern more as her concern for me, as her worry, a worry that she's had over years, ever since I was a child up until I was 18. And she could have she could have seen it from my perspective. We have very different life experiences, and it's kind of like, well, see, I'm Hispanic. So if you go to any Hispanic household, you'll find ingredients to make food, like rice, pinto beans, tortillas. These are regular things. To me, these are inanimate objects, ingredients, but to her, they're very different. To her, these are life experiences. To her, these are important milestones in life. I am one of those milestones, and at the time, I wasn't able to notice that. I didn't notice I never noticed to what degree she felt for me when it came to living with her. At that time, I never understood, and perhaps maybe she didn't understand my need for approval. So when it comes to perceptual process, it's important for everyone to really get a gauge of how we observe other people's lives and how we can break down and communicate better. What do you mean? I could have by asking others what they truly mean, how they feel, and how your words and actions make them feel.